Hi class, this is a video where I am going through the process of just listing observations. It's an ad analysis of a life insurance advertisement, and it's not, I want you to notice here that I'm not going in thinking, what am I going to write about with this ad? But I'm just going to start by just finding as many details in the advertisement that I can and writing all of those down, and then I would go through and find things that I might be able to link together to create a more complicated, complex thesis statement for a paper. So one of the things to do is to use that chart that's on page 290 that gives us the various things to look at when it comes to analyzing visual images. So one of the things was a source. This ad came from Newsweek. It was from quite a long time ago, probably back as far ago as the 1990s when I first found this thing. But it's a general kind of ad that's all about life insurance, as we can tell really quickly, and selling life insurance. The audience is going to be anybody who's reading that Newsweek magazine. The prominent element, I think pretty obviously, is this model here, Dorsey Hawkins. Focal point, I think it's her eyes. That's what draws me really quickly, is looking right at her eyes. It's kind of right midpoint of the advertisement, and she's staring right at us. There's even that kind of box there in her eyes. And you'll notice I am going through and describing specific details as I do this. So those are all things that I would want to be writing down because I might be able to use them as evidence in my analysis. All right, the characteristics of the ads. Objects, there's not really objects going on. There's definitely the figure of Dorsey Hawkins. Action, there's not really action in this. It's just a stationary thing. The background, well, gets kind of interesting, right? We've got this red bar at the top, a very dullish gray, blue, slate background behind her. I do notice that red bar mirrors the red of her shirt and the red of her lips. I noticed that the slate gray background looks very similar to the color of her eyes, so I might be able to bring in those connections. It's interesting that, and I'm kind of going off my order here, but we've got this red for the life insurance isn't for the people who die, so that die is attracted by that, is connected with that red. I might think of blood. It brings me red to the top, red to the bottom. That ties the two together. It's for the people who live. This font or this type, these words come with the blue versus the red, connecting with her eyes. So maybe it gives a positive reinforcement to the blue, to the people who live, and I'm going to associate that with possibly with life insurance. I want to zoom in now. So let's see, I'm looking at space, I'm looking at composition. How is this composed? I might notice that she's got her arms folded across her in a way that makes her appear even more tiny than she is. I might look at how, like I said, we've got the red on top, we've got the blue on bottom, we've got the words on this side, the visual on this side, why they might want to do that. And then I want to focus in on the actual writing here. Let me see if I'm able to do this. Okay. So I'll zoom in a little. I'm going to read this first paragraph. Dorsey Hawkins' father, Brian, felt a tingling in his arm. The diagnosis, an inoperable brain tumor. 6 months later, he died at the age of 33, leaving his wife to raise Dorsey and her sister, Hattie. So I would ask, what do you notice? What do you observe about that language? And so we might observe that we begin with Dorsey Hawkins. We begin with this girl, so we're connecting the writing to our visual, to the girl. We might observe in the first sentence, we've got Brian feeling a tingling in his arm. So why do we begin with that? Well, it might be because all of us have had some kind of tingling in our arm. And if we begin with something very small like that, we might say, oh my lord, I've got a brain tumor. I've got an inoperable brain tumor. My arm tingles right now. I'm going to die. So if we begin with this little thing that we can all connect with, it leads us to this big thing, which is going to lead us to what they are trying to market. 6 months later, he died at the age of 33. All right, why give us those details? Well, 6 months later, that's an incredibly quick time between diagnosis and death. So it enforces that feeling of time being precious and time being necessary, and thus insurance being necessary. He dies at the age of 33, which is very, very young to die, leaving his wife to raise Dorsey and her sister, Hattie. Here's the first mention that she's got a sister there. So it's not just this Dorsey, but it's also Hattie. I wonder why we didn't see Hattie in this as well. Maybe she's older, and so we wanted to focus on the younger girl. Maybe she's a baby, and so we're not able to get this kind of really personal connection with this girl who's staring at us and connected with us. This word leaving, a student from in the past pointed out that that word seemed important, that when you think of somebody leaving, they're leaving behind. And if you say a man left his wife, it's often voluntary, which increases the vulnerability of the people left behind. So that is an interesting word. If I go on, fortunately, Brian bought life insurance when he married and again when his daughters were born. Thanks to Brian's foresight, Dorsey, Hattie, and their mom are taken care of. So we go bad in this first paragraph. Second paragraph, fortunately. We're spinning to the positive. We know that from the very first word. Brian bought life insurance when he married and again when his daughters were born. So this guy is so smart, he did it not just once, but twice there. Thanks to Brian's foresight. Again, the positive thank you and foresight that this is looking forward. Dorsey, Hattie, and their mom are taken care of. So whereas in the first one we have leaving, now we end with taken care of. Are you prepared should the very worst happen? Without adequate life insurance, your financial plans may be just a savings and investment program that dies when you do. Consult a qualified insurance professional to help you create a plan that will continue to provide for the ones you love. So whereas the first two paragraphs are all story, this turns it to you, the reader. And the language is far more formal, appeals more to our logic, our logos, whereas these early ones appeal much more to our pathos, our emotions. It's appealing to our ethos, our desire for an authority, a qualified insurance professional there. So zooming, well, I'll focus on this still a little bit more. We get the feeling that's created, right? The emotions that created and the mood that are created in here. And I'm going back to my terminology from that diagram on page 290 that helps us with interpreting visual images. One thing I would like you to think about, so I would have gone through, I would have noticed all of these observations and written them all down. These are all the things that I found. As we get to that more complicated third level on the interpreting visual images diagram there, one of the things we get to is cultural attitudes. And I might notice that I get Dorsey's name. I get Brian's name. I get the sister Hattie's name. But whose name do I not get? I don't get the wife and mom. All she is the wife and mom. She doesn't have an individual named identity there. And I might ask, well, why is that? And what does it tell me about women and about the role of women that we don't get that name there? What cultural attitudes might that reveal? I might ask, okay, well, why is this our model here? Why is this girl the model? What cultural attitudes are revealed in that? I mean, she's pretty stereotypical blonde, white, blue-eyed girl. So why does the insurance company want to choose her as a model? And what does it tell us about the audience? But it also, I would say, what does it tell us about what is valuable in America? That this is what we choose as the valuable model there. The symbolism that I referenced earlier about the red for death, the blue for life, but I mean, we might also notice that it's red, white, and blue, right? That are the prominent colors in this advertisement. So what is that saying about America and how it's trying to represent America and who gets left out of such representations of America? So we can go from very specific details to more abstract, meaningful, complicated interpretations as we read. But we begin with the basics. We begin with the observations.